advising those members who are in the public gallery that they are welcome to use their mobile devices as long as they are in airplane mode and all devices are muted. They can connect to the Assembly Wi-Fi. Password details are available in the gallery rules. It is not permitted to take photographs or record any at the meeting. Exciting. Moving on to the committee membership. Members to note the committee membership at page 33 of the papers. Content? Declaration of members' interest. A memo from the clerk is at page 35 of your notes, explaining that all Assembly members are required to register relevant financial and other interest in the Register of Members' Interests. Details of the registered interests are published on the Assembly website. In addition to this requirement, Standing Order 69(5) states that a member who has a financial interest in any matter or a relevant interest in any matter must declare that interest before taking part in any proceedings of the Assembly relating to that matter. In particular, there is a requirement to declare any interests which might reasonably be thought by others to influence the member's approach to the matter under consideration. The proceedings of the Assembly include meetings of this committee. I wish to advise the members that at this first meeting of the committee, members should ensure that any financial or other interests which relate to the remit of the committee or which are likely to be relevant to a substantial part of its work are drawn to the attention of the committee. It should be noted that failure to register and or declare an interest may be an offence under Section 43 of the Northern Ireland Act 1998. Does any member here have any interest to declare? That is no. I would like to remind members that the rules governing the registration and declaration of interest are contained in the Code of Conduct and Guide to the rules relating to the conduct of members, and that further advice and guidance is available from the Clerk of Standards in room 254 in this building. Committee procedures. I'll ask members to note the following guidance papers: the Guide to the Powers and Operation of Statutory Committees for Chairpersons and Members. That's on page 39 of your notes. The role to the Guide of the Chairperson at page 50 of the notes, and Guide for members on the role and functions of the Committee Office, which is on page 57 of your notes. I would like to draw to the members' attention particularly guidance on privileges and matters of sub judice. Under Section 50 of the Northern Ireland Act 1998, for the purposes of the law of defamation, absolute privilege applies equally to the making of a statement in proceedings of the Assembly and the publication of a statement under the Assembly's authority. This privilege also extends to the meeting of the committee. Members should note, however, that privilege does not extend to press conferences or statements made to the press. May I quote? Committee members should be aware of the potential problems associated with discussing a matter that is sub judice, that is a matter which is being or is about to be considered by a court. Sub judice rule required by Section 41 and Schedule 6 of the Northern Act 1998 is contained in Standing Order 73. It provides that any matters in respect of which legal proceedings are active should not be referred to in committee proceedings, except to the extent permitted by the committee chairperson. In such cases, the matter awaiting adjudication should not be prejudiced by comment in a public session of a committee meeting. The rules relating to this are summarised in the Guide to the Powers and Operation of Statutory Committees for Chairpersons and Members that members have been provided with on page 32. Are we content with that? Yeah. Guidance of timescales for interaction between committees and departments. I'm asking members to note the guidance paper on page 59, which sets out the timescales for the provision of information and evidence between departments and committees, and was agreed by the Executive and Assembly Chairpersons Liaisons Group. I would like you to turn to page 59 and let's just review those. Ladies and gentlemen, are we content? I will take this as the guidance on behalf of you as the committee to hold the department to account to make sure these timings are met, and also from the Minister to make sure these timings are met. I think for those of us who have had previous experience in committees when, to say the least, there's been laggard information coming from the various departments, I think this is the bare minimum of the standard that we should accept. And going forward, I fully expect the department to meet those requirements. Are we content?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I was going to ask you or the clerk for a sort of bit of explanation. Have these been changed or updated since the Assembly's been in abeyance, or are they the same as they were in 2017?
They're the same as they were in 2017, yeah.
And are you able to give us a steer on whether you think they were sufficient then, or?
Well, they are sufficient if they're adhered to. Now, what my experience has been in the past is that I've tolerated a certain amount of leeway, and I've dealt with the DALO. However, if it gets to the stage where there are a number of papers coming late and it's putting the committee office under pressure, then I've reported back to the committee that it has become an issue, and the committee has then addressed that with the department.
Matthew, it's safe to say that the rules and regulations that would have applied to other places didn't quite apply here. And one of the things we need to do is, as a minimum, that these are adhered to. But we would expect in the future reform of how governance is done in Northern Ireland, those are significantly improved on. And I would look to see, as I would imagine every member of this committee would like us to see, to get to the point where we were actually mirror what else happens on these islands as a bare minimum. That's where we should be at, not at these, but that's where we are. Paul?
Yes, Chair, I agree with that 100%. Previous experience as Chairman of the Agriculture Committee and of Justice, this was an issue to a lesser or greater degree throughout that time, and having liaised with the chairperson's group, it was the same right across all committees. And you know something, it's just manners. And I had got to the point where I was refusing papers and refusing evidence and putting it back at least a week, simply because the papers were late. And I think that's basically the standard that we set, because it's not on, and the department will have to treat us with respect if they want respect from us. So I think it's a minimum that we expect papers in a timely fashion.
Thank you.
Chair.
That's on Monday.
Just to agree with what has been said there as well, and taking into account the new decade, the new approach. This is a new approach, and there are new members here, and that's the least that we can expect.
We didn't even get it in the Assembly chamber on Monday, I remind you.
Yep. Absolutely.
Happy to move on?
Yep.
Moving on to the next item, subordinate legislation, delegation of technical scrutiny to the examiner of statutory rules. Clerk, could you brief the committee regarding committee consideration of subordinate legislation? I think that's on page 64 of your briefing pack, 65.
Members, statutory rules are made, as members will know, to bring subordinate elements of primary legislation into law. The parent legislation determines the procedure, if any, to which the statutory rule is subject. Most of the rules, the vast majority of rules that come to this committee, will be coming under negative resolution. I think there is the odd one under affirmative resolution. The responsibility of the committee is to carry out a policy scrutiny role and to consider and report to the Assembly whether the statutory rule examined requires to be drawn to the special attention of the Assembly on technical grounds. So every statutory rule or draft statutory rule which has been laid before the Assembly is subject to Assembly proceedings. The appropriate committee may, in relation to technical grounds, deal with the matter itself, or, as is the normal practice, delegate to the examiner of statutory rules any of its functions in relation to the technical scrutiny. Now, if members look at page 66, paragraph 7, The committee is required to consider and report to the Assembly whether the statutory rule examined requires to be drawn to the special attention of the Assembly on any of the following grounds. So that's the grounds in the bullet point. And usually what committees do is they, rather than considering the matter, they drop a motion, and you see in paragraph 9 there, which is what we're putting to the committee today, if members are content to delegate authority for the technical scrutiny of statutory rules to the examiner of statutory rules.
Great.
Great.
And I should read that out, shouldn't
Yes,
I?
Chair,
Yeah.
that's the question.
And that the Committee for Finance, under Standing Order 43, resolves to delegate to the Examiner of Statutory Rules the technical scrutiny of statutory rules referred to the Committee under the above-mentioned Standing Order. The Committee further resolves that in carrying out this function, the Examiner shall be authorised to report her technical findings on each statutory rule to the Assembly and to the relevant department, as well as to the Committee itself, and to publish her report. All those in favour say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any against? Carried. I move on to the next item of business, the Legacy Report 2011 to 2016 and the Clerk's briefing. I wish to inform the members that the Clerk has provided a briefing paper at page 68, including a link to the Legacy Report that sets out the key activities, outputs and achievements of the Committee for Finance and Personnel in the 2011 mandate, and also highlights a range of issues that it believes the next committee may wish to take account of when considering its priorities. If we could turn to page 68, please, and then 69, and we have a look at those. Clerk, would you like to just read some of those ones that we had, since it was before my time?
Yes, Chair. So members will have had access to the Legacy Report from the 2011-16 committee. It's available online. In the previous mandate, which was the 2016-2017 mandate, there's a list of areas there that the previous committee had considered and had prioritised in its strategic plan. Many of those issues I'm sure members will want to take forward again. There's some of them that maybe have fallen by the wayside, but of course that's a matter for the committee to consider, and this is really just to inform members in advance of looking at the forward work programme and considering the strategic priorities for the committee for this mandate.
Can I ask, Chair, off the top of my head, was there any work, whilst they were priorities set in the last mandate, or in the 2016 mandate, was there any work done on them before the Assembly fell? What had been pursued or advanced? We talked about NAMA earlier. Were we halfway through a report on some of these, or had we stacked them up in order?
Well, everything was pretty much in the early stages. As far as rates were concerned, the committee had wanted to look at the Minister's proposals for the rates rethink. And so that had advanced to quite a stage where there were consultation documents provided to the committee, and the committee had started to take oral evidence on it. If I'm right, and I think that was more advanced than any of the rest of the...
That's correct. Mr. Chairman, could I ask formally, we had in the last committee engaged on Project Eagle, and had two, if I recall correctly, private briefings from the National Crime Agency on the NAMA investigation. Could I ask that the committee should seek a further private briefing from the NCA on this matter? And let's see, 3 years on, where we're getting to.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any against? No. Yes, please.
Perhaps, Chair, it would also be useful, now that the voluntary exit scheme has run its course, to ask for a paper from the department on the outworkings of that and the perceived successes or otherwise. Useful to have that.
All those in favour?
Agreed.
Agreed. There's certain items of this that obviously are ongoing business, particularly issues to do with rates. which will be a substantial issue. So I'll be proposing that we continue the work on rates. Obviously, the executive budget will be ongoing. The question of devolution of corporation tax seems to have reached an interest of whether it's going ahead or where it's not.
The Minister today announced that that had been shelved, and I'm just wondering on what basis he made that decision, because unless the Executive has met and dealt with that very suddenly, it was a cross-cutting issue that the Executive bought into, not one Minister. So I'm just intrigued as to why that happened today.
Yeah, I think again through the committee, one of the things we might ask the Minister next week is specifically ask him what is our policy on corporation tax, and is there an executive buy-in to where we're going to? Because it seems to me, and in the absence of any written statements or any sort of announcements from the Minister for the Economy, I haven't seen any differences in programme that has been formally announced. And I also find it quite surprising in that we have Invest NI at this present moment in time leading business groups, and part of their sales pitch for FDI in Northern Ireland is the fact that we're looking to lower corporation tax. We really need to find out from the Minister, or more appropriately from the Executive, what is the future direction and policy. And maybe that will drive our questions on corporation tax, and whether we take this on as a work stream going forward. But I think we should be asking the Minister that when we see him next week.
I agree. I think yesterday we had the Minister making his position clear. Then this morning on the radio we had the Economy Minister with a different nuance on the subject. So I think I agree, we need to know, is it on or off the table?
And I think there's also another issue, and I'll sort of bring you in there in a wee second, Sean. There is an issue, of course, there seems to be differences of opinion of whether we're going for tax-raising powers or we're not going for tax-raising powers. Are we raising rates? Are we not raising rates? Are we bringing water rates? Are we not bringing water rates? Are we doing tuition fees? Are we not? It would be useful, particularly because it's fundamental to understanding sort of the financial sustainability of Northern Ireland, that we get a view of where the Executive is in these issues.
Describe their chair as panic.
Not the word we use in this committee, Mr. Deputy Chairman. Sean, sorry.
I think Brexit will remain a priority, Chair.
Yep, agreed.
Just on that, the document, New Approach, suggests there may be a separate Brexit committee. I don't think there's been much light shed on that, whether it would be a statutory committee or a standing committee, or whether it would take away any of the oversight powers that we would have. So I think at an early stage we need to get some enlightenment about that.
Yeah, indeed. You will notice in the Chamber on Monday, I asked the question of the First and Deputy First Ministers what the process was about setting up the sort of the Brexit Committee as laid down in the new decade. I was going to use some other sort of statement about it, but the new document about going forward. I think that is vital that we get an indication of that, because the interrelationship, Sean, especially around Brexit, and the fact that we're 11 months from now, Northern Ireland will be in a separate form of whatever is going on vis-a-vis sort of the European legislation and the rest of it, and that's going to have substantial fiscal implications to Northern Ireland. And we as a committee need to be taking a very close look at what we're doing about in preparations for this and dealing with these issues going forward. But yes, I think that needs to be a substantial level of this.
I think with this, by the way, there are 3 Jims in this committee. There's Clark Jim, very intelligent Jim, and there's me. So when you say Jim, I think at times we panic. I think it's coming to us. Just to add to your shopping basket, and maybe to flag this up with the Minister, is I think we've all been lobbied on civil service pay.
Yep.
And it falls on this committee to deal with that. And the argument I think that many of us are receiving, courtesy of a campaign launched by one of the unions, is that civil service pay has fallen behind in real terms over this last 10 years. Obviously, they've watched what we've done with the nurses, and I think they're saying, us too, please. So I think we would need, I know the Chair and the Deputy Chair meeting the Minister, but I think at an early stage we need to get a briefing on what's happening there.
Thank you. Bridget?
Sorry, you just skipped on fairly quickly from the topic that I wanted to actually just
No, please, no.
comment on. Whenever we talked about the devolution of corporation tax, and then sort of the power, we'll say, in terms of the raising of tax, and that the power in terms of devolution and the setting of the rate are two different issues in a sense. And I thought it's still important, that maybe it's taken in that context as well too. And I'm not that sure, just if whenever the Minister was talking, I haven't heard what was said today, but why not was implied that they had no interest in taking on board the responsibility of deciding on, we'll say, whatever the rate is one way or the other, in relation to corporation tax. But I thought that still an area where we need clarification.
Thank you, RC.
Sure.
Sir.
Just on the frame of that, and take in mind that the Minister is coming in to speak to us next week, there was an announcement on an increase of pay for MLAs that we, or none of us, I presume, ever got sight of, or it may well have been there. It was set, yes, it was set from the Commission in order to bring this in, but I myself, as a new MLA, was not aware of that, and from a PR exercise it was it was just terrible bad timing for us all, and I've had loads of messages that is coming in there. Are we, as the Committee for Finance, is there an MLA, is there some strategy where we can have some input into that commission? No. Or is it completely separate from where we are?
No, that's the duties and responsibilities of the Commission.
Yes.
And that's through the sort of the MLAs who are sitting on the Commission to deal with the Commission to do that issue.
Yes.
And obviously I think I represent all our views here, is that the timing of this announcement and the fact that an announcement, it was deemed that we were due a pay rise, which I don't think we were, bearing in mind we haven't been sitting for sort of 3 years, and the implications of that and how that's being portrayed. There are real issues that need to be dealt with, and that's something that I would encourage you all through your parties to ask for your members on the Commission to get to the issues about this and why this was announced in the way it was without consultation beforehand, because it is very clear, I think, to everybody that not only was it not appropriate for us to be given this pay rise as it was at the timing, but actually the timing and the announcement of it as well is not the kind of thing that should have been dealt with in the way it was. And I think I can represent all the committee's view on that we're not particularly happy with that. But I have passed it on through our party to the Commission, and I encourage you to do the same. Thank you. Are we content with the legacy report team?
Yep.
If we now look forward to the draft forward work programme, may I draw your attention to the proposed draft forward work programme and schedule of evidence sessions between now and the Easter recess. And it's tabled in a slightly amended version. This one here.
Yeah, it's a table of papers.
Yeah. Tim, if we can have a look at that.
Only this is.
Yeah, if you could, yeah.
Mr. Chair, the amendment is that the oral evidence session overview and priorities for strategic policy and reform directorate scheduled for the 12th of February has been brought forward to the 5th of February. To the 29th of January to coincide with the briefing on subordinate legislation from pensions, which it hasn't. No, it hasn't, but are members content to bring that forward then to the 29th of January?
Yeah.
So, sorry, just to be clear, the overview and priorities of pensions division, did you say?
Yes.
Bringing it forward to the 29th?
Sure, the reason for that is that the pensions legislation came through in the previous mandate. Therefore, it has less time for the committee to consider it than the other negative resolution SR, so it's imperative that they're brought at the earliest stage. And it was an opportunity then when the Pensions Division were in to get them to provide oral evidence to the committee, an overview of their role and responsibilities.
That's okay.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, consent.
Well, I appreciate from that as the work progresses, we can add to this programme of work, but could I flag up an interest that I'd like the committee to seek some research on, less in consequence of that research. It's a matter which could be put into the programme of work. What I'm thinking of is, with the introduction of same-sex marriage, there are considerable issues pertaining to the question of conscience in respect of civil registrars. And whereas, for example, in the parallel field of abortion, there are conscience provisions for nurses and medical staff, and indeed in education, there are some conscience clauses in respect of teaching of some matters. It seems that there is no intent at present to provide any conscience provision for council staff or registrar staff who may be asked to do something that conflicts with their conscientious and religious position. So I would have liked the research staff to be invited to prepare a paper for us setting out the comparative conscience provisions that exist in other sensitive subject areas, in contrast to the position in respect of marriage registrars. The NIO has issued a consultation to provide opt-out and conscience provisions where they are religious marriages, but there's no parallel provision in respect of civil marriages. And I'd like a paper prepared addressing those issues.
Andrew?
Well, I would support that. I think there are many staff who are extremely worried about this. In fact, one council's gone in committee to discuss those very concerns. That I certainly know staff who are registers who just simply unconscious cannot do this work. Now, they should have the option of opting out to allow perhaps those who don't have a problem with it to do so. And remember, there are councils in Northern Ireland who have never performed the civil partnership ceremony to this day, and therefore they've never had to confront this issue. Now, there's no doubt there will be in February a number of these coming through for obvious reasons, and I think staff should have the right to step aside and say, look, this isn't for me, in the same way that churches have been given the right to say, look, we're not going to allow our premises to be used for same-sex marriages.
Just for my understanding, is this because of the finance department? We have the departmental solicitor comes under our remit.
So marriage law comes under our remit. This is marriage, so therefore it's landed on our table along with
If same-sex marriage had remained a devolved issue, it would have come through the Department of Finance,
right,
and this committee.
Chair, I would, if I could comment, I would be concerned about doing that under the auspices of the committee, while I respect the position of others who, it's a completely, and I understand that conscience is a legitimate question at this point, and people have differing views that are sincerely held. My comment/question would be, if research reports can be commissioned by individual MLAs, would it be better for individual MLAs to make those requests, and they can publicise them? So I have a two-part question. One, would that be a better way of doing it rather than the committee's time? In recognition of the fact that, as many of us have said today, we are, in a sense, in the front line of proving to the public that we are focused on value for money and improved governance in Northern Ireland. That it might be it might be slightly odd to some people if one of the first bits of business of the Finance Committee is to look at this. Notwithstanding, I accept it's a very important issue to people, and I'm not saying individual members can't pursue it, but I would wonder if it's something to be done at this moment under the auspices of the Finance Committee. And then my second question is, if it was done, would it be publicised, and what is a bit more information? That would be my question.
Yeah, again, understanding the members' views, and I totally agree with Matthew on that. And is it the role of this committee to do that?
Well,
Could I comment on that?
Sure.
It's a subject matter which falls within the jurisdiction of this committee. In consequence, it is something that this committee, in due course, could decide to examine. My proposal is a very simple one, that in the context that it's within the jurisdiction of this committee, and something that I, as a member of this committee, would like to see the committee perhaps ultimately examine, I think it is wholly appropriate that, without commitment to where it goes hereafter, that we should at least inform ourselves through the research paper as to what precisely are the legal parameters and the present provisions and how they compare with other sensitive issues. So I do think if it's something that's within the ambit of the committee, then it's wholly appropriate that it should be a committee request. And that's why I make the point in the committee, rather than simply asking for it as an individual member, because it's the jurisdiction of this committee we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yes, Chair. Through the course of the life of this committee, we will be asking for all sorts of research papers on all different subjects, notwithstanding a particular subject. It is just practice that we would be asking and requesting research papers. That's, I think, if I'm reading it right, that's what Jim is asking for. I would have no problems anybody asking for research on any given topic that falls within the remit of this committee. And we'll find that as we progress through our journey here, there'll be maybe 2 or 3 research papers asked for every week on different subjects. So, notwithstanding the subject, it shouldn't be an issue just to get research done that we can then all inform ourselves of.
So I understand it, sort of, Jim Allister, just in other words, I'm Jim Wells, so we get all the right.
Brinny Jim. Chairman Jim, an ordinary Jim.
Outsider Jim.
Yeah, awkward squad Jims.
No, he's the awkward one.
All 3.
Yeah. But the proposal is that we request research to see if there's any grounds for taking this any further.
To set out for us what the current actual legal position is and whether or not there are any governmental plans to deal with it, and to compare and contrast it with steps taken in respect of other conscience issues in other fields that are sensitive.
Can I add to that? In all our jurisdictions also,
Yeah.
to see what has been done, but best practice in all our jurisdictions.
Up with that.
Sure.
And maybe in addition to that as well too, it isn't just an issue, say, for the individual, but also a responsibility then on council to ensure that they make provision in terms of the equality basis for all people who would wish to go along and avail of their services and that there, so that it couldn't just be limited to, i.e. the conscience of individuals, which effectively in some cases could leave a council area without anyone in a position to perform that marriage, ensuring equality for all citizens.
Well, I'd have to say, I think once same-sex marriage is in, the registrars have a statutory duty to provide it. It's a question of whether within that framework there could or should be a conscience right for individuals to say, well, someone else will do that, I'm not doing that. It's not that a council would opt out of fulfilling the statutory duty. It's that what the rights of council personnel or registrar personnel would be.
So just to, thanks for that. Sorry.
Maybe to counter or to try and stay with the approach, would it be possible that I would counter that proposal to say that we take more time, we find out what are the other mechanisms, as Matthew's already stated. It may well be there for individual MLAs to be able to go and access that research of themselves, and rather than, I mean, we're not asking a long wait here in order to find out, and someone will come back maybe with a paper on the parameters of the research, or how it infringes upon this committee, or what are the wider aspects of it. So I'm asking for a recess maybe of a week until we get something back, exactly what it is that we're looking to do here, and how it will impact on any further decisions of the executive or whatever within are coming from this committee?
It doesn't impact on anything. It's simply informing us of what's going on out there. I've sat in this assembly for 25 years, and every week a committee will ask for information. Sometimes it'll go absolutely nowhere. Sometimes it will steer the committee in a certain direction. But it's with the committee's consent what we do with this information. We're not holding ourselves to anybody, and we're certainly not holding the executive to anything.
Yes, well, I'm not disagreeing or agreeing with anything that you've said there, Jim, but I'm saying that I personally wasn't aware that this was on us today, and I would like a little bit more time. I'll do my own research before I find myself or being asked to take a vote on this now. So I would like to counter-propose that we put making that decision off until next week. And I make that as a proposal.
Okay.
Just to append something to that, I wonder, while again appreciating what both Jims have said, it would be helpful to have a. So I think part of what the slight confusion here is, not confusion, but greenery, as it were, in my part, in relation to lack of experience. I mean, and is exactly what does what does this mean? If this research is commissioned, is it published on the Research Services website, and does it say this was commissioned by the Committee for Finance? It would be helpful just to know what it is we're commissioning. And
for next week.
Yes.
The committee, and again, I apologise as a chair not being fully over the brief to the degree that I realised that this was an issue that would have been part of the Finance Committee. I need to inform myself more. I would like to propose that we formally table this as an agenda item for next week, having taken due consideration, and we all take the opportunity to update ourselves and understand where we are.
Yes.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Okay. And if we move on to some of the areas of the forward work programme, some of the things potentially we could be looking at. The new decade, new approach agreement, including funding of all spending, the fiscal councils, and the sort of the tax conditions that are part of it.
Yeah, well, that'll take us up to lunch anyhow. Yep.
The budget for the current financial year, the next financial year, and the priorities for 21-20 financial year. But I would also like to add to that, if we're looking at multi-year budgeting, and then looking out to year 3 and beyond. But that will probably come after the March budget that the Chancellor of the Exchequer is going through to see how that is looking at. But we need to do that, so it needs to be longer-term budgeting process.
Sorry, Chair, I was just going to ask on that point, and I don't know what others think in the committee. If it's been practiced in the past, I think it would be useful for this committee to have some kind of hearing on the UK budget, which we expect. I don't know if that's been the approach in the past. I personally would, my suggestion would be it would be very good to get Treasury officials from the devolved spending teams, and to that might be a useful kind of declaration of intent in terms of demystifying the processes.
That would be very useful.
Yeah. Great.
Thank you very much indeed, ma'am. Yep.
Sorry, Chair, would you like me to ask research to include that as part of their?
Yes. But also the Treasury have officials who are part of the devolved spending group and the devolved administrations group.
The devolved spending team, yeah, which sits within public spending group in the Treasury. So there's a Northern Ireland spending team. There's a separate devolved group. There was a few years back when I was there.
Matthew, would you like to extend a proposal that we propose that we invite one of them to come and sort of give evidence to the committee?
Yes, but it probably is worth research service or the clerks investigating the appropriate person. That would be my suggestion. I don't know but if others think it would be useful use of the
without sort of putting words in your mouth, if that became the proposal, that would be the proposal.
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. Rates policy and any proposed changes. And as part of this process, I think I've already asked the clerk to talk to the various business groups so that they can give us a written brief beforehand, so that we begin to understand the sort of the rates dynamic and the issues behind that. Code of conduct and a code for appointments for special advisors, which we'd scheduled under the chairman's business. I think it's appropriate that we look at that. And bearing in mind, I would like to get raised to some research to do comparisons against what happens in the other regional
No, I think I
administration.
need a week to think about that, Mr. Chairman, because that's been sprung on me, and that's a very complex and difficult issue.
Jim, sorry.
That's the problem.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
what you're
well,
asking for is perfectly reasonable, and I don't feel it's been sprung upon me.
All right.
There.
Very good.
You would, Jim? Yeah, I thought you would. Yeah. Corporation tax.
Sorry, are you finished with the
No, we're still going down.
SPAD issue?
No, please, Phil.
No, just, yeah, I think your letter is important, making the point that we might have expected some sight or some knowledge about these matters, particularly since on the Code of Appointment there was a significant retreat from the present position. There's much in the Code of Conduct that's good. I have my views about whether without legislation it's enough. Obviously I don't think it is, but there was a significant retreat in the Code on appointments, because what the old code said was that a minister must consider a pool of candidates which must be broadly based, that the selection had to be on sustainable and lawful grounds, and the minister's reasons had to be recorded. It also said each stage of the recruitment process had to be recorded and retained for at least 1 year, so that corporate HR in finance were to be in a position to report on compliance with the code to the finance minister, and it was necessary to retain the associated paperwork in order to ensure this was possible. All that has been obliterated. Now that to me is a retrograde step in the realms of transparency and openness. And I think if the minister was minded to obliterate, particularly obliterate something from the Code of Appointment, all the more reason why your letter is appropriate, even though the horse may have bolted, to make the point that surely it would have been appropriate to have brought that matter to the committee's attention if the minister was going to retreat from standards already established. I think the letter is important in that regard.
Chair,
Okay.
are we discussing the letter now, or are you not still talking about corporation tax? And
No, we're still going through the sort of the business, because one of the items of sort of the likely business was on the Code of Conduct.
it's okay.
So we'll discuss the letter when we get.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, I misunderstood. I thought I'd asked you.
Oh, we
You
haven't got
said
that.
we were now at the letter.
No, we haven't got that far.
Okay.
No, it's just looking at the future business on issues. One of the things that have been suggested is corporation tax.
yeah,
Yeah.
Great. The department's remit in relation to Brexit, that's a definite. And what the outruns and the outturns are from the RHI inquiry when it arrives. Great. Okay. May I suggest that following the briefing from the Minister and potentially the Permanent Secretary on the 29th of January, the committee will wish to explore in greater detail the main issues facing the department, so we get the opportunity to find out from the Minister directly and then move on from there. I'd like to point out that the schedule includes time to hear from officials and stakeholder groups. This will allow the committee to form its own views in advance of agreeing a more detailed forward work programme. And the forward work programme will be flexible to allow the committee to schedule urgent or important business as the need arises, and I am quite sure it will. I'd also ask members if they're content to schedule written evidence sessions from the CBI, FSB, Retail NI, the Northern Ireland Retail Consortium, Hospitality Ulster, Manufacturing NI and NICFA in advance of the committee's consideration of the ratings issues at its meeting on the 5th of February. I'd just like to expand on that, because we're being asked to look at something that is of considerable interest to the business and the wider community within Northern Ireland. And I think before we have that meeting with officials, it would be useful if we had updated briefings. We won't have time for the oral briefings, but to have written briefings on their sort of key issues, that we as a committee are fully informed of some of the issues that are pertaining.
Yeah.
Sean, you have
It's just there's no way you could facilitate all of those groups.
not on the time scale. But I think, look, we have the opportunity to read in.
Yeah.
I think we're all aware of sort of the concerns that are out there.
Yeah.
But just as an opportunity to get updated to those points so that we can be much better informed when we're having that discussion, if we're content. Also, I would like to ask the members if they're content for the clerk to schedule informal meetings between the chair and the deputy chair with the NICSHR and CPD in advance of their oral evidence sessions to the committee to obtain more detail on their remit. I can more than happy to open those up to other members of the committee. This is to inform. I have to be clear. I do not have sufficient evidence and information to be able to ask the appropriate questions at this stage. I need to get myself up to speed on this. And the easiest way is to talk to them informally before the meeting, and that, I think that would be appropriate. So if any of you would like to be included in those meetings, if we set those up, I'd be delighted to have you along at those meetings. And it'd be a purely informational meeting, but we need to be able to understand the remit before we get to that point.
It has to be commended, Chair, and the answer to that would be yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got probably most of us, but I'd be brought up to speed on it as well.
There's no point. I will not bring people into this committee to question them if we are not appropriately ready to ask those questions and have the information in front of us. And I think it does ourselves as a disservice, but more importantly, it's a lack of it's a mark of disrespect to the people we'll be bringing in to give us evidence.
Okay.
I'd like to inform members the list of SRs scheduled to come to the committee in the coming weeks is in the tabled papers. Are the members content to proceed with the evidence sessions as set out in the work programme? Agreed. Moving on to correspondence. We've had congratulatory letters to both of us, you and I, Paul, from the Attorney General.
Very kind
That
of
was very nice of him. Yeah. We thank the. No doubt that will materialise as well. May we thank the Attorney General for his letters.
Can I ask, sorry, Paul, I was just going to ask, is there a particular reason why the Attorney General would write to the Finance Committee, or is it just...
You will get to know the Attorney General.
Or is he just likes writing letters? And I
You will get to know who's done.
I know lawyers charge a lot for them, but I thought, well, he's not allowed to anyway.
He's an interventionist.
Yeah, you will.
I see, okay.
Matthew, it will be part of your education process, and it won't take long. Yeah.
great spot.
Okay, I'd like to now move on to chairperson's business. I'd like to inform members a letter tabled from the Minister inviting the chair and chairperson to an introduction meeting on Monday, the 27th of January. That's scheduled for 11:30. I just ask the members who are content to arrange this meeting. Agreed. I'd like to draw the members' attention to the written statement to the Assembly on Monday, the 20th of January regarding the Special Advisor appointments. The letter of the Business Office, Code of Conduct for Special Advisors, letter of appointment issued to Special Advisors, remuneration of Special Advisors, and code governing the appointment of Special Advisors. I was, to say the least, quite disappointed that, having been aware from other sources that information had been available for several days beforehand, that as a courtesy, the committee, as the chair of the committee, had already been informed, hadn't been informed of that. So I would ask the members to say that in the interest of openness and transparency, it would have been appropriate for the committee to have had the opportunity to consider and comment on the policy proposals before they were agreed by the executive, because I believe there was time for that. I'd like to inform members that in anticipation of the committee's agreement, I have asked the clerk to draft a letter to the Minister expressing the committee's disappointment regarding the way this was handled. The draft letter is included in the table papers. Gemma.
Yeah, Chair, it's just I understand where you're coming from and agree with most of the letter, but I think the tone is a wee bit inappropriate. You know, if you've said it in your letter about being a new decade and your approach, maybe we should start off with a better working relationship with the Minister. I understand we have to hold him to account, but I think the letter's a wee bit too confrontational for the subject that we're discussing. I understand where you're coming from, but I just think you know, we need to tone it down a wee bit.
Comments?
I don't know how you would tone it down. It's very anodyne, I would have thought. But I earlier made the comments I made about, I think, the need for the courtesy was all the more by reason of the fact that there was this significant retreat on the code on appointments, liquidating all the requirements to consider a broadly based pool, to record the reasons for the appointment, so that all that could be held and examined. And the removal of all that, to me, is the total antithesis of the embracing of transparency. I think that's a very retrograde step. So I think, given that, your letter's fine by me.
Paul?
Yes, Chair. I have no problems with the letter whatsoever or the content. You're not going into any detail around policy. You're basically talking about the fact that due diligence and process haven't been adhered to with regards to openness, transparency and cooperation of this committee. If we do not get off on the right foot with the Minister and the Department on how we will conduct business, they will try everything they can in order that we don't get involved and informed of all the policy decisions. So we need to make sure that we step off on the right foot and we have a professional relationship with the Minister and his department. I believe this letter is fine. I believe it's strong enough. It has to be strong enough, and it's civil and it's businesslike, and I support the letter 100% and the content. And I do think we need the opportunity to speak to the Minister and the Department on the content of the policy, which is what Jim was raising earlier, which is the secondary part of this process. But the letter, to me, is fine.
Okay.
I was just coming quickly, Chairman. I basically think the letter's fine, reflecting the comments of Gemma. I mean, in terms of finding a way forward, if there's a, perhaps an insertion of something, if it's the first bit of correspondence between you and the Minister, or the committee and the Minister, perhaps, a line at the beginning saying congratulations on your appointment, we look forward to working with you. I don't know if that would address people's concerns around tone, but something, I think there might be a way of inserting those words if that would kind of help just generate a bit of consensus in the committee. Other than that, I think
Okay, we'll insert, through the committee, I will insert a congratulations on being Minister, first line. Okay, thank you very much, Steve. Could I draw members' attention to an email and newspaper article from Retail Northern Ireland regarding Reval 2020 on page 107? I think we'll bring that into our work programme when we're looking at rates. We content to bring that into our work programme when we're looking at rates and the issues around rating and re-evaluations. Okay. Could I draw the members' attention to the organisation chart from the Department of Finance on page 109?
Very colourful.
I can also encourage you, probably do it electronically, but don't print it all out because it kills numerous rainforests. Details of the department, because I think, as we've informed ourselves today, and I've informed myself as chairman, the department has quite a wide remit, and there are quite a few areas of that we need to be able to have appropriate oversight of. And one of the first things we need to do is actually understand the size and scope of the department and what it does. It's significant, to put it mildly.
I need a pair of glasses.
Yeah,
second pair, please.
You and me both, Sean. We'll swap ours. We'll see. Okay. Okay. Any other business?
Chair, I might have missed it. I noticed that the chairperson of Retail NI, there was a letter. I mean, do we go out on our own regular formal sales? That I'm putting on my hat as an ex-publican. I didn't say Republican, I said publican. But I'm just putting on that hat, and the stresses, with which rates has on that retail sector especially, and I'm not sure just myself, even though I've been out of the bar now about 5 or 6 years, if there still is that monopoly which is charged to licensed premises. And I think that from a point of view, it's the time, do we have the time on the committee to be addressed by them? I know what you said earlier, there may not be, but I mean, is there a way that we can have an informal meeting? Or is it worthwhile for us to have that with the committee?
We'll probably do it briefly. Sorry, I'm just discussing with the clerk. It would be my intent to have all the sort of organisations to come and give formal evidence in front of the committee as we go forward. The reason I've asked for this written brief from them now is because the urgency of the SR coming through. I just wanted us to be informed we need to do a considerable degree of work around rates. The implications of it is the implications on the high street, implications on the hospitality industry, all that issue as well. We need to look at that as much as well within the finance envelope as we have going forward. I particularly, I will welcome as much of that sort of briefing as we can have. It's just the timings of this particular question about the SR. I felt uncomfortable about looking at the SRs and dealing with the issues of sort of getting the briefings and rates without having had an opportunity for them to talk to us. But we don't have the time to do the oral brief. We can do that afterwards.
Yes, but I'm sure you will agree, Chair, it's the lifeblood of small businesses that we have here within Northern Ireland.
It is the lifeblood of. I can go further than that and say it's the lifeblood of Northern Ireland.
Yes.
Sorry, Paul.
Yeah, just on that, one way it struck me of informing ourselves on as many people and interest groups as possible. Now, I know we're talking about a specific issue on a specific stat rule that's going to come before us, and there's time pressure on it. But on a more wider aspect of rates and maybe even rates evaluation, one of the things that worked very well in the last term, or before we fell, was roundtable discussions where we had everyone in the room, whether it be the Long Gallery or a smaller venue, and basically allowed everyone to speak at the one session. Now it's diluted to a certain degree with regards to one particular interest group speaking, but at least you get the flavour of all the mindset of the room and all the interests in the room at the one time, and it might be a way forward given the fact that we have only 2 years left of this term, and there will be questions posed upon this committee that we will have to address.
Thank you.
Chair, thanks for indulging your patience. Just one quick comment on it relates to the future work programme as well. It's really for advice from yourself and the clerk in terms of potential process for agreeing invitees and evidence givers. So in relation to ratings, like the Northern Ireland Business Group are completely critical to hear from. They have loads of insight and but I think it's also really important that we get, where possible, a committee like ours has academic insight, particularly comparisons in other jurisdictions and other places, and so I just, as a question really, how do we ensure that we...
Matthew, through your experience, if you've got any links, please let us know. And one of the things Rays are particularly good at is doing the sort of the networking piece.
Yeah.
And one of the things we need to establish over the length of this, I know we've only got 2 years of this committee, but I want us to establish strong networks across as wide of a community as possible so that we are well informed. So no matter what happens, we actually are able to do our role. And our role, above all else, is making sure we've got good governance and good scrutiny. And quite frankly, we probably don't have the skill base amongst ourselves, and I know some of us are very skilled, but we need to be able to reach out to the people who have that, and it's our job to make sure that we're well informed to ask those questions going forward. Ladies and gentlemen, just before I adjourn the meeting, the date of the next meeting, the formal start is at 1400, but 13:30 for a part of the Rays briefing.
Yes, Chair, I'd check with Rays if they're able to provide it next week at 13:30, and if so, we'll schedule that in.
Yeah. Any final comments, Deputy Chair?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed, and thank you very much indeed for your indulgence. Thank you.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly